We live in a digital world. Social media is how everyone gets their information and shares messages with one another. In terms of book banning, there's almost no research on the subject, and there's even less research on the effects of social media on book banning. Book bans are an issue that is becoming more prevalent as time progresses. We are seeing the impact of extreme censorship everywhere on social media. Book indexes are being released with more banned titles for recommended reading every year. Social media platforms are places for authors, students, and protesters to voice their thoughts and opinions on the matter. But are the effects of book banning awareness on social media all good? New laws are being passed every day, making it more difficult for children and teens to access titles, and literary professionals are receiving hate mail from parents. In this presentation, I'm hoping to look at the balance of positive and negative social media effects on book banning, and look at the discourse surrounding controversial topics. Furthermore, I will discuss how book banning reinforces the idea of censorship and white racial habitus in classroom ecologies. First, I will define what constitutes a book ban, then I will apply Inouye's discussion of white racial habitus and compare it to the statistics of topics being banned. Next, I will introduce the positive and negative effects of social media on the censorship of literature, broken down by platform. Lastly, I will look at the political side of the problem, seeing how book bans violate First Amendment rights and how these laws are impacting students at a local level. PEN America's definition of a book ban is extremely specific. They define a book ban as any action taken against a book based on its content and as a result of parent or community challenges, administrative decisions, or in response to direct or threatened action by lawmakers or other governmental officials that leads to a previously accessible book being either completely removed from availability to students or where access to a book is restricted or diminished. This can mean being pulled from shelves, taken off online databases, removed from bookstores, etc. In sum, a book ban is a complete censorship of literature and a violation of a student's right to learn diverse topics freely. While lawmakers claim to ban books that have explicit content, there is an undeniable theme across books being removed from school shelves. Books that feature marginalized and minority groups are at the top of every list. This connects to Inouye's discussion of white racial habitus in classroom ecologies. He explains, if we are not careful, our assessments will create conditions that perpetuate white supremacy and racism through hierarchical categorizing, which is in large part what judgment is. Looking at some of the PEN America stats, it is evident that there is a staggering number of books being banned simply because they feature stories of marginalized groups. In removing books that discuss race, sexuality, mental health, grief, etc., the government is forming a classroom ecology of white racial habitus as described by Inouye. Expanding on this concept, the culture of classroom is not even strictly one of white racial habitus alone, but it also centers itself on a heteronormative ideology. YouTube is a great platform to spread awareness about book bans. Authors who are facing critique can publish video responses to their bans and their overall opinion on banning books. Award-winning author John Green, whose book Looking for Alaska was the most banned book of the year in 2019, made a response video to his book's removal. He explained the context of the book and explained that the very scene putting the book under fire was there to teach an important lesson to young teens. It is also a great platform for posting longer videos that provide context and contribute to the overall conversation of book banning, especially at local levels. School districts can also stream informational board meetings on YouTube to keep students and parents involved in the local discourse surrounding banned books. Horry County is redefining their banned book laws, and local news stations can share up-to-date information on the state's decision on the platform. I'll cover more on that soon. Online links in YouTube are also where authors have begun to publish their books online and in audio format to continue providing access to their banned material. TikTok has a whole subdivision known as Book Talk, where people can share banned book recommendations, post opinions on book banning, and share legal attempts to remove books from shelves. Instagram is a fantastic platform for many different advocate groups to make informational posts and get people's attentions on the growing problem, and spread hashtags that increase audience involvement, such as hashtag #StandWithTheBanned, hashtag #BannedBooks, and more. PEN America stats also show that young adult books are the primary genre being faced with bans and challenges. TikTok and Instagram have younger audience demographics, and these two platforms are where you hear student voices the most, who have proven to be the most affected by book bans. This is an interesting comparison to the age range of Facebook users versus how they typically use the platform. While there are many positive uses of social media to spread awareness about book bans, there is an equal amount of negative feedback. Unfortunately, a darker use of social media is facilitating attacks against professionals. Librarians and teachers have been harassed and doxxed via online platforms for speaking out about the importance of intellectual freedom and extending such rights to children. Teachers have begun to receive threatening notes from parents on social media, most commonly on Facebook. Due to the harassment, many teachers have resorted to self-censorship and elect to keep potentially controversial books out of their classrooms to avoid potential challenges. Facebook's age range is more representative of the parents and government officials who are responsible for the book bans. Some people have even used the platforms to create book ban advocate groups, the most popular being the ironically named Moms for Liberty, who formed with the intention to shed negative light on topics and ban even more books than the ones already facing challenge. Often they suggest titles for review without ever having read the book, completely disregarding their context. They claim it's all about age-appropriate content, but every book regarded as sexually explicit featured on their Facebook page is about an LGBTQ relationship or minority story. This furthermore connects to the ideal of setting a classroom ecology of white racial habitus, forcing a primary discourse on students based solely on what their parents want them to learn. Since social media has been shown to give positive and negative awareness to book banning, it is also important to address how its capabilities may have coincidentally started the whole movement. Book bans have skyrocketed in recent years, and when people share books online, even if well-intended, they're putting them in the spotlight, and getting novels put onto lists when they become viral enough for protesters to see them. Book bans, however, are getting increasingly more sales and attention simply because they were put on banned lists. Cambridge University scholars did a study that underlined the same concept in media censorship, proving that when governments suddenly impose censorship on previously uncensored information, citizens accustomed to acquiring this information will be incentivized to learn methods of censorship evasion, basically enunciating the idea of if you tell someone not to do something, it only makes them want to do so more. This can be seen on the post on the left from a customer who participated in a bookstore trend called Blind Date with a Book, specifically because it was high-ranking on a banned list. This also ties back to the mention of authors republishing their work for free online so that students can continue to access their banned material. Many cases of these book removals are justified for violating constitutional rights. The Constitution states that there needs to be a separation of church and state. Many of the bans set forth by the government and banned book advocate groups mimic the followings of Christian ideology and completely juxtapose that notion. Most of the content being restricted include LGBTQ relationships and teach critical race theory. Amy Anderson discusses how book banning violates the rights set forth in the First Amendment of the Constitution, guaranteeing students the ability to have free speech. The classroom is often a student's first experience with the marketplace of ideas championed by First Amendment advocates. Exposure in a classroom setting has been credited by the court as critical to the development of a student's morals and principles and the preparation for students in an American society. This idea connects to what Inouye was discussing in his paper. He enunciates that in limiting students from learning about diverse cultures, a white racial habitus in and out of the academy is normalized. When white habits of discourse are all we see and hear in our education, they become all we think there is or should be, even when some of us do not match up to them. This further enforces the need for culturally diverse books in academia, and that in banning books we are not only disregarding our First Amendment rights, but we are blatantly forming social values of a white, straight, heteronormative society. After protests from the Horry County branch of Moms for Liberty, other protesters, and government officials, a new bill was proposed this November by the South Carolina Board of Education to reevaluate the reconsideration process for the removal of books from school shelves. If passed, books will undergo a test requiring materials to be both age and developmentally appropriate and educationally suitable, aligned with the state's instructional program. New procedures will be enacted for public participation in the review of existing instructional materials, allowing residents, parents, or guardians to file complaints. Said books will be discussed in a state meeting. If appealed, books will be subject to an election or review with considerations for academic rigor, educational significance, validity, accuracy, objectivity, and appropriateness. If a book fails to meet these requirements, it will be banned from all other schools in the county. The finite availability of library shelf space and whether the space occupied by any particular volume could be better filled by a different volume with greater academic rigor, objectivity, or accuracy, literary or educational merit or quality will be considered by the state for the selection of educational materials. Let us examine even further what this looks like at a local level. This is only one of many bills being proposed about book banning across the United States. The part of this bill specifically that is cause for issue is the ambiguity. It requires that educational material be age and developmentally appropriate and educationally suitable. But who is to judge what is appropriate for the minds of individual students going through their own discovery of self-identity, culture, and personality? The school board? A panel of state officials? Including parental decision in a student's curriculum only prohibits students from having the freedom to form their own unbiased ideology. Passing this bill destroys the credibility of school librarians whose job it is to select these materials. In most cases, media center librarians are the one who use data and their own educational knowledge to cultivate a collection of literature that is representative of everybody. For the government to come in and undermine that is not only disrespectful, but it announces publicly that the community does not trust their own employees to do their job. On the right is a list of 12 books officially banned by the county since January of 2022. Overall, book bans are a way for the government to set a classroom ecology of white racial habitus as defined by Innuo. Through social media, book bans are gaining more awareness, which has both benefits and consequences to the cause. While the exposure does help authors publish and sell their work, teachers are getting a lot of backlash for incorporating banned content in their curriculum and personal library. In addition, the increased recognition of book bans may also be adding fuel to the fire. Since there is more awareness, more people are advocating for the removal of literature. In banning books, the state government is denying students their First Amendment right, and our very own Horry County is joining the trend and proposing new laws for reconsideration of educational material, completely undermining our librarians. We need to take a pause and think about the negative effects book bans are going to have on students. Representation is so important in literature, and it is essential that students are able to find these materials in a safe and controlled environment. While not explicitly talking about social media, I think John Green summarizes the perspective of government and parental involvement best in his banned book response video. He says, "If you have a worldview that can be undone by a novel, the problem is not with the novel." Here's a list of all of my sources. I hope everybody enjoyed my presentation and that you have a fantastic day.